So, hello, my dear students. Hope you guys are all doing good. Hope you guys are all perfectly fine. So, now we are going to discuss one more standard, which is about SA 610. So, not that important from the examination perspective, but still, since it is there as a part of our syllabus, I will try to explain it. But this standard is not that important from the examination perspective. Very frequently, they don't ask the question from this chapter, but still, from the CFNL perspective, the standard is going to be very important. And this particular standard SA610 is going to be talking about using the work of the internal auditor. And by reading the title itself, you might be well aware this standard is going to talk about something relating to internal audit. This standard is having the linkage with the concept of internal audit. So let us try to analyze this title of the standard. From analyzing the title of the standard, I want to make some important interpretation here. So SA610, what is the title which they are using here? They are telling SA610, title of the standard is using the work of internal auditor. What is the title? Repeat everybody along with me. What is the title of SA610? The title of the standard SA610 is using the work of internal auditor. Now, from this title, I want you to ask one simple question. So tell me from this title what you are able to understand. Who is going to make use of whose work? So I have two questions for you here. Who is using whose work? Whose work is getting used? And who is using the work? Can somebody let me know? So what is the title once again? Using the work of internal auditor. Okay, I will give you options. Number one, management making use the work of internal auditor. Option number one. Option number two, internal auditor making use of external auditor's work. Number three, external auditor making use of internal auditor's work. So when the standard title says using the work of internal auditor, what do you imagine? What is your perception? Who is going to make use of whose work? Is the management going to make use of internal auditor's work, or is the internal auditor making use of external auditor's work, or the external auditor is making use of internal auditor's work? See, let us try to solve this puzzle in bits and pieces. First, we will address simple thing. Whose work is getting used? That is very much easier to understand. Whose work is getting used? See, if you see the title of the standard, using the work of internal auditor. So, whose work is getting used? That is certain. Internal auditor's work is getting used. Internal auditor's work is getting used. So this is definitely not a valid option. Internal auditor making use of external auditor's work, that is not a valid option. Why? Because the title says using the work of internal auditors. So whose work is getting used? That is very much a certain. Internal auditor's work is getting used. Now the question is, who is using that internal auditor's work? Is the management using the work of internal auditors, or external auditors are making the use of internal auditors' work? See, when I say standards on auditing are applicable to whom? Standards on auditing, who has to comply? So standards on auditing gives the guidance relating to how to conduct the audit. But will the standards be used by management, or will the standards be used by auditors? See, standards on auditing are actually guiding principles for auditors, not management. We never say management has to comply with standards on auditing. Did I tell you anywhere management has to comply with the standards on auditing? No, management will never comply with the standards on auditing. Standards on auditing are something which is relating to auditor. Standards on auditing are something which is relating to auditor. So it is not going to talk about management. The standard has nothing to do with the management. So the correct option is external auditor using the work of internal auditor. What is the correct option? External auditor making the use of internal auditor's work. So that is what the standard is going to talk about, using the work of internal auditor. Sir, but who is going to make use of whose work, sir? External auditor making use of internal auditor's work. Now let us try to analyze from a conceptual perspective. Is it valid or is it suitable for the external auditor to make use of the internal auditor's work? Is it suitable or is it acceptable for the external auditor to make use of the internal auditor's work? Let us try to address this question. Let us keep aside standard. What is the standard telling? We'll come to that later. Just I am asking you to use your conceptual clarity, to use your imagination and ask a question to yourself. will it be suitable for the external auditor to make use of internal auditor's work? That is what my question. So for this, we will try to go into the basics of what is the function of external auditor, what is the function of internal auditor. See, external auditor, what is the function of external auditor? To express an opinion. To express an opinion. What is the function of internal auditor? Value addition. What is the function of internal auditor? Value addition. So he will find out the weaknesses happening in the organization. He will report it to the management. He will tell the suggestions to improve the organization also. That is what the function of internal auditor. Whereas external auditor's function is to express an opinion. He will just verify the financial information and express the opinion. Next. Sir, what external auditor will verify? Only financial information he will verify. Sir, what internal auditor verify? Like I have told you, internal auditor is not just concerned with the financial information. He will even verify other aspects of the organization. So when I say internal auditor, he will not just verify financial information. Along with that, he will also verify non-financial information also. Now, who will do in-depth verification? Who will do much more in-depth verification? Before that, let me put one more thing here, where there will be continuous interaction, where the auditor will continuously work for the company. In case of external auditor, there is no continuous interaction. See, external auditor will not come to the client's organization every day like an employee and work throughout the year. No, it is not going to happen. So external auditor will come to the client's premises once in a while. That could be once in a year, once in 3 months, once in 6 months, whatever it is. So the external auditor will come to the client's premises once in a while, do the verification and go away. But internal auditor, there will be a continuous interaction. What will be there? Continuous interaction will be there. Sometimes internal auditor will be employee also. He will work like an employee, regular employee of the company. So there will be continuous interaction here. Who will do much more in-depth verification? Much more in-depth verification will be done by internal auditors. Much more in-depth verification will be done by internal auditors than when compared with external auditors. So by doing this comparison, I can say one thing. See, whatever external auditor is required to do, what external auditor is required to do, verify the financial information. That work will be already done by internal auditors, that too in a very in-depth manner. Whatever work that external auditor is supposed to do, the same work will be done even by the internal auditors also, but in a much more in-depth manner than when compared with the external auditor. The work done by the internal auditors is much more in-depth. They will try to do even in-depth verification than when compared with the external auditor. So what is the conclusion I have made, guys? Everybody repeat. Whatever work external auditor is required to do, the same work will be even done by internal auditor. And who will do it in a much more in-depth manner? Internal auditor is going to do that in a much more in-depth manner. So let me give you some example. For example, assume that as an auditor, you are required to check statutory compliances, whether the company is complying with the laws and regulations or not. You are required to do. Like for example, if you are conducting audit of a company, whether that company has complied with the provisions of Companies Act 2013. Like if you remember the principal aspects to be covered in the audit, auditor is even required to look into statutory compliances. So as an external auditor, you are required to verify statutory compliances. Before you do it, if there is a already internal audit department in the client company, internal auditors would already have done that laws and regulations verification, whether their client company has complied with all the laws and regulations or not. That is already done by internal auditors, that too in a much more in-depth manner than the external auditor. One more example, let me give you one more example. You want to know whether the company has created provisions in a correct manner or not. You want to know, you want to obtain audit evidence as an external auditor. See, whatever work you are supposed to do, that is whether the client has created enough of provisions or not. Before you do it, internal auditors would have already done it. Whatever provision verification you are supposed to do, that internal auditors also will do it, whether the company has created enough of provisions for all the expenses. There are no such expenses which are outstanding but provision is not created. That verification will already be done by internal auditors, that too in a what much more in-depth manner. So that's what I'm trying to say here. Whatever work which external auditor is supposed to do, that work will also be done by internal auditors, that too in a much more in-depth manner. So if you keep the standard aside, even if you apply your mind practically, even if you apply your concepts practically, so will it be suitable, will it be acceptable for the external auditor to make use of internal auditor's work? Yes. No problem. Why? Because whatever you are supposed to do, that internal auditor is anyhow doing it, that too in a in-depth manner. So why can't I make use? Why can't I take the help of the internal auditors? You take it. You definitely take it. That's what even SA 610 also says. So if the external auditor wants, the external auditor while conducting the audit and in the process of expressing an opinion on the financial information, he is required to do various work if required. If required, the external auditor can make use of internal auditor's work without any objection. Without any objection. Standard also permits it. Standard also permits it. But you have to read, you have to be a little bit careful here. When I say SA 610 is permitting the external auditor to make use of the work of internal auditor, it is just an option given to external auditor. It is not a compulsion. It is not a compulsion. It is not mandatorily required for the external auditor to compulsorily make use of internal auditor's work. No. If he wants, he can use it. There is no prohibition. So be careful in the words which I am using. Be careful with the terminology I am using. It is not a compulsion on the external auditor to make use of internal auditor's work. But it is not a prohibition also. That means if the external auditor feels like using the work of internal auditor, he can use it. If he wants to make use of the internal auditor's work, what precautions he has to take, what procedures he has to follow, what steps he has to follow, that's what SA 610 is going to give the guidance about. If external auditor has decided to make use of internal auditor's work, once again I am repeating, if external auditor decided to make use of internal auditor's work, what steps he has to follow, what precautions he has to follow, when in what areas he has to be careful, what things he has to analyze, that guidance has been given under SA 610. Okay, now see, before I go into the explanation of the standard, I would like to bring to your attention one more point. See, I'm an external auditor. See, standard is giving me the permission. As an external auditor, if you want, you can make use of the internal auditor's work. So I assume that as an external auditor, like as I've told, I want to verify whether the company has complied with all the laws and regulations or not. This I did not verify it on my own. I used the work of internal auditor. I went to the internal auditors and asked them, sir, you are anyhow internal auditors. No, you will also verify laws and regulations. No, you tell us whether the client company complied with all the laws and regulations. The internal auditor told me, yes, sir, we internal auditors, we verified laws and regulations as a part of our internal audit. There are no violations. There are no violations. This company has complied with all the laws and regulations that internal auditors told. To whom they have told? To the external auditor they have told. So this fellow thought, okay, I will not verify laws and regulations once again. Why? Because anyhow internal auditors are telling, they are telling there are no violations. I will believe the internal auditors. This external auditor decided, I will believe the internal auditors. I will not once again do the verification of laws and regulations. Internal auditors are telling me that there are no violations, and SA 610 is also telling me I can rely on the work of internal auditors. So I will automatically, without any verification, I will form a conclusion that I gave an opinion that the company has complied with all the laws and regulations. So this fellow relied on internal auditor and told that the company has complied with all the laws and regulations, and he gave a positive opinion. But after a certain period of time, it came to the public domain. So you gave unmodified opinion. But later, it was realized that this company, your client companies are Mix Limited, they have violated so many laws and regulations. Later, the news came in the public domain that so and so client for which you have given a positive opinion, that company has actually committed so many violations, so many laws and regulations were not complied with. Now you tell me, who will have to face the consequences? If I have given the wrong opinion, as an external auditor, I gave positive opinion, but actually there are violations of laws and regulations. Now, can I simply shift the blame onto my internal auditor? Can I say, boss, don't come and ask me. I relied on the work of internal auditor. I relied on the work of internal auditor. Internal auditor told me all laws and regulations are complied. I believed him. I also agreed that laws and regulations are complied. I gave positive opinion. Now if you say laws and regulations are not complied, don't come and question me. Go and blame the internal auditor. As an external auditor, you tell me, can I shift on my blame to internal auditor? No. Be very careful here. So, as an external auditor, even though the standard is permitting you to make use of the internal auditor's work, but if something goes wrong because of using of the internal auditor's work, external auditor can't shift on the blame to internal auditor. Ultimately, you have given the opinion, you have to only face the consequences. You only have to face the consequences. Now, we'll say, sir, why, sir? Why, sir? Standard is permitting me to use the work of internal auditor. That's why I used. That's why my opinion has gone wrong. Why can't I shift the blame to internal auditor? For that, the answer is very simple. Did the standard make you a compulsion? Did the standard tell you you have to, you must compulsorily make use of internal auditor's work? Did the standard made it mandatory for you to use the internal auditor's work? No. It is your choice. You have decided. Standard told if you want to use it, use it. But here implied meaning is if you want to use it, but please be ready to face the consequences arising out of it. But please be ready to face the consequences out of it. Sir, what will be the consequences? As I have told, if something goes wrong because of using the internal auditors work, later you can't shift the blame onto internal auditors. You only have to face the entire consequences. If you are ready, yes, do it. If you are ready, you can do it. That is what the standard has told. Able to understand? So I want to make one interpretation here. So you tell me, do you think every external auditor will always prefer to make use of the internal auditor's work? Generally, no. Why? Because if you have decided to make use of internal auditor's work, you have taken more risk. If you have decided to make use of internal auditor's work, you have taken more risk. Why? Because you are not verifying, you are relying on the internal auditor's work, and in future, if something goes wrong, you can't shift the blame also. So that's why, as an external auditor, generally external auditors will not prefer always to go and make use of the internal auditor's work. So when generally external auditors will make use of internal auditors work is when they have very tight constraint on time. For example, work has to be completed in a very short span of time, or you are having scarcity of resources, you don't have enough of audit staff. So in these kind of extreme scarce time and resources, then only external auditors will try to prefer to make use of the internal auditors work. Once again, I'm telling you, external auditors using the work of internal auditors is not always a go-to option for external auditor, but they can do it. When generally external auditors will try to exercise this option is when they have extreme scarcity of time and resources. When the external auditor is having scarcity of time, there is very less amount of time in which you have to complete the audit, or there is extreme scarcity of resources. For example, you planned the audit with 10 people, out of that some 5 people have become sick, now you have to complete the audit with 5 people only, you have short scarcity of resources. In these extreme circumstances, I can make use of the help of internal auditors. So that is what I wanted to say here. So what did I tell you till now, guys? So I have explained who is going to make use of whose work. External auditor going to make use of internal auditor's work. Is it practically suitable? Yes. Is it compulsion? No. Is it optional? Yes. If external auditor makes use of internal auditor's work, if in future something goes wrong, can he shift the blame onto internal auditor? No. Do you think external auditor always prefer to make use of internal auditor's work? No. When they will generally do it? When there is extreme scarcity of time and resources. In unusual circumstances, external auditors will try to make use of internal auditor's work. Understood? So this is what introduction regarding the standard. Now, if at all auditor has decided, okay, I will make use of internal auditor's work, then what steps he has to take, what precautions he has to take, what procedures he has to perform, that is what SA 16 talks about. See, I always say, guys, when you are reading any standard on auditing, you must have objective, you must have it clear. What is the objective of the standard? What is the purpose of the standard? Why the standard has been given? Unless and until you are crystal clear about the purpose and objective behind the standard, you read the standard 1,000 times, the concept will never be clear. So if you want the concept of the standard to be very clear, first you should know what is the purpose of the standard, why this standard has come into effect in the first place. So that's why if you see the initial 20 minutes I have spent the time without explaining even one technical concept from the standard. Till now, this 20 minutes of time, whatever I have utilized till now, that is only to make you clear why this standard has come into picture in the first place. Okay, so I hope now everybody is clear why the standard has come into picture, what is the objective behind the standard. So now we can proceed further and understand the technicalities of the standard. Everybody, shall we start? Let us do it now. So now if we go into the technicalities of the standard, see, in order to understand this entire standard, we just need 5 minutes of time. So we just need to have one small conceptual clarity. This entire standard is based on one small thing. If we understand one simple thing from this standard, this entire standard we can complete in just some 10 to 15 minutes of time. But in order to complete that entire standard in 10 to 15 minutes of time, we need to understand one simple thing here. See, by now we have all become clear that yes, external auditor can make use of internal auditor's work. This we all have become clear with. External auditor can make use of internal auditor's work. This we all clear with. Now, external auditor can make use of internal auditor's work in two ways. The external auditor can make use of internal auditor's work in 2 ways. Sorry. Remember carefully, guys. Once again, I'm telling you, just if you follow me for the remaining 5 minutes, the entire standard we can wipe it off in 15 minutes. So please pay attention. So everybody agree with me? External auditor can make use of internal auditor's work? Yes. Now I am going to explain about 2 ways in which external auditor can make use of internal auditor's work. Sir, what are the 2 ways in which external auditor can make use of internal auditor's work? I will say type 1 usage. I will say type 2 usage. Sir, what is type 1 usage? What is type 2 usage? Let us try to understand in a little bit detailed manner. I will give the technical names to that. Number 1 is, when I say type 1 usage, it is generally called as using the work of internal audit function. What is the technical name for type 1 usage? Type 1 usage is technically called as using the work of internal audit function. Type 2 usage, we call it as using internal auditors for direct assistance. Type 2 usage is what? Using the internal auditors for direct assistance. So come on, repeat everybody. External auditor can make use of internal auditor in how many ways? 2 ways. Type 1, type 2. What is type 1 usage called as? Using the work of internal audit function. What is type 2 usage called as? It is called as using the internal auditors for direct assistance. So let us try to understand what do you mean by using the work of internal audit function, that is type 1 usage. What is the meaning of using internal auditors for direct assistance, which is type 2 usage. First, I will focus on type 1. So this I will try to explain it with the help of example. Assume that I am conducting audit of the company X Limited for the financial year 2022-23. See, generally when I will go for audit, once the year gets closed. See, this year got closed on 31st of March 2023. After the closure of the year, myself along with my engagement team. So I'm an external auditor, myself along with my engagement team. We went and started doing the audit from 5th of April 2023. This is the date on which we have started doing external audit. Now, during the course of this audit, as we all know, if I'm conducting audit of this company X Limited, I need to verify various things. So I need to verify books of accounts. I need to verify assets. I need to verify liabilities. I need to verify incomes. I need to verify expenses. I need to do physical verification of fixed assets. I need to verify physical verification of inventory. I have to verify laws and regulations compliances. I have to verify tax compliances. So like this, I am required to do various activities as a part of my statutory audit. But here in this audit, I'm having scarcity of time and resources. I have to complete the audit within less amount of time, or assume that I don't have enough of staff. I'm shortage on article assistants. So what I'm thinking is, when it comes to tax compliances, this last area, as a part of my external audit, I am required to verify tax compliances also. I need to verify whether the tax compliances are correct or not, whether the company has complied with all the tax laws and regulations or not. That also I need to verify. But what I'm thinking is, see, I'm having extreme scarcity of time and resources. I don't have time and resources. Let me do one thing. In this company, there is already an internal audit team. In this company, there are already internal auditors. By the time I started doing my audit, internal auditors have already done their audit and they have even given internal audit report also. By the time I started doing audit, internal auditors have already done their internal audit and there is already a internal audit report. So this is an internal audit report. See, when I say internal audit report, it will not be very small like external auditors report. External auditors report is very limited. Why? Because if you remember, what will be there in external auditors report are opinion, basis for opinion, title, address. Very hardly 5-6 pages of audit report will be there. Which auditors report? External auditor. But if you look at the internal auditors report will run for 200-300 pages. Internal auditors report will run for 200-300 pages. Not like external auditor's report where hardly 5-6 pages will be there and report will get over. If you open internal audit report, it will contain 500, 600, in some cases it will go up to 500 pages of internal audit report. It will be more than the size of your audit book. Sir, why the internal audit report will be that much detailed? Why? Because very simple. The logic is very simple here. External auditor's objective is what? To just give the opinion and get lost. What is the objective of the internal auditor? He needs to verify each and every item of financial information, other information, tell his findings, give the recommendations. So each and every finding, conclusion, everything will be included in the internal audit report, not just opinion. What and all are his observations, what are his comments, how that can be overcome, all that suggestions will be there in internal audit report. So that's why 300-400 pages of internal audit report is already there. So now what I am doing is, as an external auditor, I need to verify tax compliances, but I don't have enough of time. I thought one thing, okay, let me do one thing. Internal auditors have already given their internal audit report. I will take their internal audit report. In that internal audit report, they have also mentioned their findings on tax compliances, whether the company has complied with all the tax regulations, they calculated the tax as per the applicable tax act, GST act, income tax act. So on tax compliances, internal auditors have already included their comments and the internal auditors report. So I got that internal audit report. I went to the respective section of tax compliances. In that audit report, internal auditors told that the company has complied with all the tax laws and regulations. In the internal auditors report, internal auditors have mentioned that the company has complied with all internal, this particular entity has complied with all the tax laws and regulations. Tax has been complied with the Income Tax Act, GST Act. The internal auditors told everything is perfectly fine with the tax compliances. So as an external auditor, I thought, okay, I will not once again verify all the tax compliances. I will take this internal audit report. I will believe whatever internal auditors are telling. Internal auditors are telling the company has complied with all the tax related laws and regulations. External auditor also came to conclusion without verification. He did not verify. He came to the conclusion, okay, I will form a conclusion that I will form a conclusion that this company has complied with all tax laws and regulations. Now you tell me, did external auditor verify this? No. How he came to that conclusion? By simply using the internal auditor's report. So here the usage which external auditor has done of the internal auditor's work, that we generally call it as using the work of internal audit function. What do we call it? Using the work of internal audit function. Which means, if I put it in simple terms, using the work of internal auditors which is already done. Using the work of internal auditors which is already done. Internal auditors has already performed some work in the past and they have given their audit report. Now I am using that audit report. So using the work which is already performed by the internal auditors in the past, that I am going to call it as type 1 usage, which is using the work of internal audit function. That is what I am going to call it as using the work of internal audit function. Able to understand everybody? So this is what type 1 usage. So then what is type 2 usage? To explain the type 2 usage, I will use the same scenario. Once again, I am an external auditor. I have been appointed as auditor for X Limited company for the financial year 2022-23. As I have told, when I say I have to do the audit, I have to take care of, I have to perform all these activities. No, when I'm doing audit, external audit, I have to do all this activities. So I need to verify my client's books of accounts. I need to verify their P&L items. I need to verify their tax compliances. I need to verify their laws and regulations. Here also same situation. I don't have enough of time. So I decided in the tax compliances, I will use the work of internal auditors. But now what I have done is, see, as an auditor, I need to verify whether the client has complied with all the tax laws and regulations or not. So what I am doing here is, I'm going to the internal auditors. I called them. Sir, I want to talk with you once. Please come. So these internal auditors came to external auditor. Now this external auditor told this internal auditors, sir, we are required to verify tax compliances as a part of our external audit. But we don't have enough of staff. I need your help. How I need your help is, I will tell you what we are supposed to do. What steps we are required to, what audit procedures we are required to do in verifying tax compliances. I will tell you. Why don't you do this work for us now? I will tell you there are some audit procedures which we are required to perform in the area of this tax compliances. Now I will go and request my internal auditor. sir, there are some 10-15 procedures I need to perform in the tax area. You please do that audit procedures for me now. The work which external auditor is supposed to do, I am getting it done through the internal auditors under the direction, supervision and review of the external auditor. See, in both the cases I am using, in the first case whatever I have explained, there also I am using internal auditors work. In the second case also I am using internal auditors work. In the first case, I am not asking the internal auditors to do the work now. In the first case, internal auditors have already done the work in the past, just I am using their report for my audit purposes. This we call it as using the work of internal audit function. In the second case, as an external auditor, I am not making use of the work which is already done by internal auditors. I am not making use of the work which is already done by internal auditors, but in fact what I am doing is, I want some procedures to be performed. But instead of doing it by my team, I am asking the internal auditors, sir, you are also auditors only, no, please do this audit procedures on my behalf. Please do some audit procedures on my behalf. I will tell you what procedures you are required to do. I will give the direction. At the time when they are doing the work, I will supervise them. And after they have done the work, even I will review whether these internal auditors have done the work properly or not. So under the direction, under the supervision, under the review of external auditors, the work will be done by internal auditors now. This we call it as using the work of internal auditors as a direct assistance. Using the work of internal auditors as a direct assistance. Guys, hope you are all able to understand, able to differentiate between these two types of usage. See, if you got clear with these two types of usage, entire standard we can complete in 15 minutes, guys. I'm telling you, it will not take more than 15 minutes to complete the standard, but you have to understand the difference between these two types of usages. So once again, a quick recap. Come on, participate. External auditor can make use of internal auditors work in two ways. Type 1 usage, type 2 usage. Type 1 usage, also called as using the work of internal audit function. Type 2 usage, also called as using the work of using internal auditors for direct assistance. Difference between the two. In type 1 usage, I want to make use of internal auditors work, but I will not ask them to do the procedures now. They have already done the audit. They have already given the audit report. So internal auditors have already done some work in the past, gave the audit report. I will read that audit report. I will find what internal auditors have already told in their audit report, that I will simply use it. So that is what the meaning of using the work of internal audit function. That means the work which is already done by internal auditors in the past, that I am going to use it now. That is type 1 usage. Sir, what is type 2 usage? Type 2 usage is, I will not use the work which is already done by internal auditors. What I will do is, as an external auditor, I have to perform some procedures. I go to the internal auditors and request them, sir, I will give you direction, please perform some audit procedures on my behalf. So I'm not using their past work, I'm getting the work done through the internal auditors now under my direction, supervision. That is what type 1 usage. Hope you guys are able to understand. So if you got understanding regarding the difference between this type 1 usage and type 2 usage, now with this background understanding, let us try to complete the standard. So now what will be there in the rest of the standard is, if you are using type 1 work, what precautions you have to take, what things you have to evaluate, when you should not use type 1 work, when you want to make use of type 2 work, then what precautions you have to take, what precautions you have to take, what procedures you have to perform, when you should not make use of type 2 work. So like this, the standard will say. That's all will be there in the standard. Let us try to read it, what they are trying to say. That's all, guys. Concept is over. Now just reading and finishing the standard is pending. So first they have told us some definitions. Let us see what are the definitions. Definitions. Number 1, internal audit function. Sir, what is the meaning of internal audit? This we have already seen in the internal audit question as per the Companies Act. So what is internal audit? See, same definition will be there. A function of an entity that performs assurance and consulting activities, which is designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of entities' governance, risk management, and internal control process. Nothing but they're asking you, what is the meaning of internal audit? Tell me, what is the meaning of internal audit? Like we have read in the meaning of internal audit as per Companies Act. So internal audit is a system. Internal audit is an independent, objective, and consulting activity designed to improve organization. The same thing, they elaborated it here. So what is internal audit? Internal audit is one of the function in the organization that performs assurance and consulting activity. And what happens in the internal audit? we try to find out weaknesses and we will try to improve the overall organization. What and all we'll try to improve? We'll try to improve the entity's governance, nothing but we'll try to improve the management of the entity. We'll try to improve the risk management. We will even try to improve their internal controls. Nothing but this is what we have understood as overall improvement of the organization. So that function of an organization which is oriented towards improving the entire organization's performance, that we are going to call it as internal audit function. So then what is the meaning of direct assistance? They are also defining direct assistance. Let us see what is the meaning of direct assistance. The use of internal auditors to perform the audit procedures under the direction, supervision and review. This is what I have told you now. So as an external auditor, I want to perform some procedures. Instead of doing it by myself, I am getting it done through the internal auditors under my own direction, supervision and review. So external auditor will give direction, he will supervise, he will review, and under the direction, supervision, review of the external auditor, internal auditor will perform some procedures. That we call it as direct assistance. Clear? So these are the two definitions given. Now let us come to the objectives. Nothing but why this standard has been given. Let us see. The objectives of the external auditor when entity has an internal audit function and the auditor expects to use the work of internal audit function. That means if you are an external auditor and in your client's organization there is an internal audit department, and as an external auditor you want to make use of external audit, as an external auditor you want to make use of internal auditor's work, then you need to do certain things. What are they? To determine whether the work of the internal audit function or direct assistance from internal auditors can be used. If so, in what areas and to what extent? See, first of all, you have to decide whether you want to make use of internal auditors work, either type 1 or type 2. Either you want to make use of internal audit function or direct assistance. First, you have to decide it. As I have told, every time external auditor will not use this option. He will use it only when there is scarcity of time and resources. So as an auditor, you consider various factors and then analyze, do you want to make use of internal audit function or direct assistance? Whatever it could be. Do you want to use type 1 work or do you want to use type 2 work? That you have to decide. See, that is completely your choice, guys. There is no hard and fast rule. Auditor should use only type 1 work. Auditor should use only type 2 work. There is no such hard and fast rule. It's up to the auditor. Auditor himself has to decide, considering various factors, whether he wants to go for type 1 usage or type 2 usage. If yes, in what areas you want to make use of the work and to what extent you want to make use of internal auditor's work, that you have to decide. Number 2, if using the work of internal audit function, if you have decided you will go for type 1 usage, then you need to determine whether the work that is done is adequate for the purposes of the audit. If you have decided, okay, I will make use of type 1 work only, I will use the work which is already performed by internal auditors, then what you need to determine is, if you are using the work which is already done by the internal auditors, check whether they have done that work adequately. See, internal auditors have already done the work. You want to use it. Blindly will you use it? No. First, you have to determine whether they have done their work properly. If yes, then only as an external auditor, you make use of the internal auditor's work. Next, if using internal auditors to provide direct assistance, if you want to make use of type 2 work, then you have to give them proper direction, proper supervision, and proper review. If you have decided to make use of type 2 work, give them proper direction, give them proper supervision, review. Why? Because now you are making them work, so that's why give them proper direction, supervision and review. So if they ask you, what are the objectives of the auditor as per SS16? 3 simple things. First, you have to determine whether you want to make use of type 1 work or type 2 work. If you have decided to make use of type 1 work, check whether the work has been done adequately. If you have decided to make use of type 2 work, give them proper direction, supervision and review. Now they are talking about type 1 work. If you have decided to make use of type 1 work, what factors you will evaluate? If you want to use the work which is already done by internal auditors, whether to use that work or not to use that work, how you will determine? By the time I have started going for the audit, internal auditors have already given their internal audit report. Whether to use this internal audit report or not, on what factors you will decide? Very simple, guys. If you apply the common sense here, what factors you will keep in mind and decide whether I should use this internal audit report or should not use this internal audit report? Very simple. Number 1, whether the internal audit department is independent. See, I told internal audit department can be an employee also, internal audit can be outsider also. Who will be more independent? Outsider will be more independent. When the internal auditor is more independent, I will be more comfortable in using the work. When I came to know that internal auditor is an employee, management can use more influence on him. That means he might be biased towards management. In that cases, I will try to stay away from using the type 1 work. So first thing which I will check in deciding whether to use the type 1 work or not is whether the internal auditor is independent person. to what extent he is independent. If he is more independent, I will be more comfortable in using his work. If he is not independent, I will not be comfortable in using his work. Understood? Next, apart from that, what else I will use? I will also check his competence. What are the capabilities of internal auditor? I told internal auditor can be any professional. If I came to know that internal auditor of the client is a chartered accountant, he's very knowledgeable, he's very talented, very experienced person, I will be more comfortable in using his report. If I came to know that internal audit is done by one's normal BCom graduate without any background experience in the audit department, I will try to stay away from the usage of internal auditors work that. Understood? Not just that, even I will try to check whatever work that he has already done, whether he carried out that work in a systematic and disciplined way. Whether he carried out in a systematic and disciplined way. So these are the three factors which I will evaluate. Simple, guys. If you want to decide whether internal auditors work, whether type 1 work can be used, that means with whatever audit report which has already given by internal auditors, whether I can rely it or not, on what factors you will decide. Number 1, I will check what is the independence of the internal auditor. Number 2, is he having enough of competence? Is he a capable person? Number 3, did he carry out the work in a systematic and disciplined way? If I got positive answers for all these 3, yes, the auditor is internal auditor is an independent person. He is having enough of competence. He has carried out the work in a systematic and disciplined way. If I got positive responses for all the 3, I will be very comfortable in making use of type 1 work. If for any of these 3 questions I got non-satisfactory responses, like internal auditor is not independent, or he did not have enough of competence, or he did not carry out his work in a systematic and disciplined way, I try to stay away from using the type 1 work. That is what they try to say here. So factors to evaluate. The auditor shall determine whether the work of internal audit function can be used for the purpose of the audit by evaluating the following. So if you are deciding should I make use of type 1 work, then what factors you will consider, whether I can use the internal auditor's report or not. To decide it, what factors you will evaluate. Number 1, the extent to which internal audit functions organizational status and relevant policies and procedures support the objectivity of the auditor. See, objectivity is more or less similar to independence only. Objectivity means what? Unbiasedness. More or less similar to independence. So first thing which I will check, the status which is given to internal auditor and policies and procedures of the company, are they permitting the internal auditor to act independently? See, in some organizations, internal auditors will be given a lot of respect. They will be treated equal to the management. He will be given supreme powers. That means he is more independent. In some organizations, they will treat internal auditor like any other ordinary employee. Anybody will come and give him any work. In that cases, he will not be independent. So I will check the organizational status given to the internal auditors, the policies and procedures of the company. Do they promote the internal auditor to act independently? If yes, the organization culture is very good, they have strong policies and procedures with regard to internal auditor, then he will be more independent. If he is more independent, I will be more comfortable in using his work. Number 2, the level of competence of the internal audit function. Competence means capability. So second factor which I will evaluate, how competent the internal auditor is. Is he a qualified person? How many years of experience he is having? So if he is more qualified, more experienced, I'll be more comfortable. Next one, whether the internal audit function applies a systematic and disciplined approach. That means whatever work they have already done, whether they have done it in a systematic and disciplined way, I will check. So these 3 factors I will evaluate. Now if you see the next point, prohibition on using type 1 work. When I should not use type 1 work? Very simple. I have evaluated 3 factors now. For any of these 3 factors, if I got negative responses, then I should prohibit myself. Then I should not make use of type 1 work. The same thing they say. The external auditor shall not use the work of the internal audit function. If the external auditor determines that the function's organizational status and relevant policies do not adequately support objectivity. Nothing but for first point I got negative comment, or the functions lack sufficient components, or second point I got negative comment, or the function does not apply systematic and disciplined approach. That is for the third point I got negative responses. So in any of these cases, if I got negative responses for any of the above 3 factors which I have evaluated above, then I will prohibit myself from using type 1 work. Understood? Now similarly, if I want to make use of type 2 work, so what do you mean by using type 2 work? I will not use their past work. I will now allocate the work. In deciding whether I should allocate the work to the internal auditors or not, in deciding that, what factors you will consider? Whether you should allocate the work. I am not using their past work. I want to allocate the work to the internal auditors. Before you allocate the work to the internal auditors, you have to decide whether you should allocate or not. In deciding whether I should allocate the work to the internal auditors or not, what factors I will consider? Same like above. First, if I allocate the work to the internal auditors, is he in a position to act independently? Is the internal auditor independent enough so that whatever work I have done given to him, will he be able to do it without any influence? That I will evaluate. So independence I have to evaluate. Number two, whether he is having enough of skill and competence. If I allocate the work, if I allocate some audit procedure to the internal auditor, is he having the capability to do that? Is he having the capability to do that? So nothing but out of the above three factors, whatever I have to evaluate, the first two factors I have to evaluate here also. That's all. See, third factor is not relevant here. Whether internal auditors has done the work in a systematic and disciplined approach, that is not relevant. Why? Why? Because in the case of type 2 work, I'm not using their past work. I'm getting the work done now. So anyhow, I will give direction, supervision and review. I need not check whether they have done their work already in a systematic and disciplined manner. That I need not check. That I will check it in the first case. Why? Because I am using their past work. But in the case of type 2 usage, I will not check the third point. I will evaluate only two factors: whether he is having independence to do it, whether he is competent or capable enough to do it. Understood, everybody? See here, the same thing they will try to say here. Factors to be considered. If you want to use internal auditors to provide direct assistance, that is, if you want to make use of internal auditors for direct assistance, then external auditor shall evaluate two factors. What are they? Number one, the level of independence and objectivity. If I allocate the work to internal auditors, how far he is independent and objective to do it. Number two, the level of competence. Is he competent enough? Is he capable enough? That's all. When I will prohibit myself from using type 2 work for any of the above two factors, if I got negative responses, see, I came to know that even if I allocate the work to the internal auditor, he is not in an independent position to do it. I will not allocate. If I came to know that internal auditor doesn't have enough of skill and competence to do it, I will not allocate. So for any of the above two factors, if I got negative responses, then I will prohibit myself from using type 2 work. The same thing they say that the external auditor shall not use an internal auditor to provide direct assistance if there are significant threats to the objectivity. If there are any threats to the independence, then you should not allocate the work. Similarly, if the internal auditor lacks sufficient competence, if he is not having enough of capabilities, then also the work should not be allocated. That's it. And however, when you allocate the work, the external auditor shall direct, supervise and review the work performed by internal auditors. And how to review that work, that is anyhow we will come to know in SA 220. Next one, there is even one more important point here. There are certain areas which shall not be allocated to internal auditors for direct assistance. So if you have decided, for example, in deciding whether you want to allocate the work to internal auditors or not, you evaluated these factors. You came to know, yes, auditor is independent, he's having enough of competence. So you thought, okay, we can allocate the work to the internal auditors. But you decided to allocate the work to internal auditors, but some kind of work should not be allocated. Certain areas of work you should not allocate. Why? Because they are little bit risky. Other areas you allocate. Standard says you decided, okay, it is suitable to allocate the work to the internal auditors. Fine. But there are certain areas which you should not allocate to the internal auditors to the extent possible. You have to do it on your own. Other areas you have to allocate it. Very simple, guys. If I give you one simple logic, see, if you allocate the work to the internal auditors, you are already taking risk, no? If you have allocated the work to the internal auditors, you are already taking some risk. Will you try to once again allocate high risky areas? Definitely not. See, by using the work of internal auditors, I am already taking risk. Why I would allocate once again high risky areas to internal auditors? For example, I am conducting audit of an IT company. Revenue recognition is a very risky area. Will I go and allocate that area only to the internal auditors? No. That work you do it using your own staff. Other areas you try to allocate it. Able to understand? So like this, certain areas, if you have decided it will be suitable to make use of internal auditors work, but still don't allocate certain areas to internal auditors, do it on your own. Other areas you allocate it. Sir, which areas should not be allocated to internal auditors? Let us see. The external auditor shall not use internal auditors to provide direct assistance to perform procedures that involve making significant judgments. If you have certain item of financial statements in which so many estimates are used, for example, provisions involve a lot of estimation, depreciation involves a lot of estimation. Will you allocate these kind of estimations to the internal auditors? No. Why? Because whenever they use estimation, the risk is very high. The chances of assumption going wrong are very high, no? So that to the extent possible, those areas of the financial statements where there are so many assumptions involved, don't allocate that work to internal auditors. Try to do it using your own team and staff. Next one. Areas that relate to higher assessed risk of material misstatement, as I have explained. If you find certain areas very high risky, for example, revenue recognition in IT company. So if you came to know that revenue recognition is highly risky, why I will allocate it once again to the internal auditors? I will try to do it on my own. Similarly, area that relates to work with which internal auditors have already been involved. For example, you came to know that in the client company, tax calculations are done by internal auditors themselves. Management asked internal auditors to do the tax calculation. Will you once again allocate the verification of tax allocation to internal auditors? No, it will be a self-review threat. No. If they are already involved in preparation of some information in the financial statements, you should not allocate the verification of the same work to the internal auditors. Why? Because it will be a self-review threat, right? They are reviewing their own work. So that's why if you came to know in certain item of the financial statement, if internal auditors are already involved in its preparation, don't allocate that work once again to internal auditors. Why? Because they are only preparing it, they are only verifying it, self-review threat. That area you verify it on your own, other areas you allocate it. Understood? So the standard says these areas should not be allocated to internal auditors. This work should be done by the external auditor himself. Three areas they have to. What are they? Areas that involve significant judgments, areas with higher risk of material misstatement, areas in which internal auditors have been involved. These three areas you don't allocate it to internal auditors. Try to do it on your own. Come on, guys. Till now, what we have understood. First, we have understood what is some definitions. What is the meaning of internal audit function? What is the meaning of direct assistance? Number two, what are the objectives of the standard? Number three, if you want to make use of internal auditors work for type 1, what factors you have to evaluate when you are prohibited from using type 1 work. Similarly, when you want to decide, when you want to confirm that whether you can make use of type 2 work or not, what factors you have to evaluate when it will be prohibited. And along with that, what are certain areas which should not be allocated to internal auditors for direct assistance, that also we have seen. There is one more point. We have two more last points are there. So let us try to quickly complete it. Obtaining written agreement. See, the standard says that as an auditor, as an external auditor, if you have decided to make use of internal auditors for direct assistance, if you want to make use of internal auditors for direct assistance, you have to obtain written agreement. You have to obtain written agreements. From whom, sir? From two people you have to obtain written agreement. One from management and other from internal auditors. Sir, what written agreement from management? See, internal auditors are working for whom? Management. Who will give salary to the internal auditors or payment to the internal auditors? Management. Now, if as an external auditor, if I go and ask internal auditors to do some work, will they do it just when I ask them? No. They should also get the permission from management. Why? Because as an external auditor, I am not paying them the salary. I am not giving them the amount. Who has employed them? Management. So they will listen to whose instructions? Management. And once again, assume that if I have decided to make use of internal auditors work, as an external auditor, I allocated some work to them. Management is also allocating some work to the internal auditors. Whose work they will do? They will do management's work. Why they will do my work? So that's why if you decided to make use of work of internal auditors, you have to go to the management and ask a written agreement. What written agreement you know? Sir, I am going to make use of internal auditors work. You please permit that internal auditors to work for me. And also, when I am using the work of internal auditors, you please don't come and interrupt. You please don't come and allocate them extra work. Why? Because they will definitely do your work only. Why? They will obey my objection. Why? They will obey my instructions. So that's why if you decided to make use of internal auditors for direct assistance, first ask the management to give written agreement, written confirmation. What written confirmation? Dear management, you give us a written confirmation that you will allow the internal auditors to work for us, and when the internal auditors are working for us, you will not come and interrupt. Ask the management to give a written agreement. Then all things will go smooth. Otherwise, it will be a lot of ruckus. So that's what they say. Prior to using internal auditors to provide direct assistance for the purpose of the audit, the external auditor shall obtain written agreement from authorized representative of the entity, that is management, that internal auditors will be allowed to follow external auditors' instructions and that the entity will not interfere when in the work of internal auditors which is performing for external auditor. So nothing but ask the management to give an agreement that they will permit the internal auditors to work for them and they will not come and interfere when the internal auditors are working for them. Similarly, external auditor also has to obtain written agreement from internal auditor. What is that? See, I am involving internal auditors in my work now. If I am involving internal auditors in my work, they will come to know about my plans, how I am going to do the audit. Should the internal auditors keep that information confidential or they will go and disclose it to the client? They should not disclose it. So ask the internal auditors to give a written agreement. What written agreement? Dear internal auditors, we are involving you in our audit. If you came to know any specific information, please keep it confidential. Don't go and inform it with the management. So this written agreement you have to obtain from internal auditors. So this is the same thing here. Obtain written agreement from the internal auditors that they will keep confidential specific matters as instructed by external auditor and inform the external auditor of any threat to their objectivity. So nothing but you ask the internal auditors to give a confirmation that they will not go and disclose all the information to the management, and in case if they face any threat to either independence or objectivity, they will come and inform the external auditor. So like this, if you want to make use of external auditors work, if you want to make use of internal auditors work for direct assistance, you need to obtain one written agreement from management. Also you need to obtain one written agreement from internal auditors also. Understood? And similarly, whenever you have decided to make use of internal auditors work, there are certain things which you need to add it in your audit documentation. As we know, for every audit we maintain audit documentation. So in your audit documentation, you need to include some extra things along with your regular documentation. You need to include some extra things whenever you are making use of internal audit function. So when you use a type 1 work, what things are required to be included in the audit documentation? When using type 2 work, what things are required to be included in the audit documentation? That's what they try to say here. Nothing conceptual here, just a list of items they will say, so that we need to document. Let us see what are those items which we will document in case if you have decided to make use of internal auditors work. Let us do it. So if you see here, so if you want to make use of type 1 work, so what things we will try to include in our documentation? Very simple. If the external auditor uses the work of internal audit function, then the external auditor shall include what in his documentation. See, if you remember, if you want to make use of type 1 work, 3 factors you will evaluate now. So what you have evaluated regarding these 3 factors: how you came to know the organizational status, what is the competence. So you have to check whether auditor is competent or not, internal auditor. So you have to write what is his qualification, what is his experience, whether he has applied a systematic and disciplined approach. Nothing but what things you have evaluated. We will decide whether to make use of internal auditors work for type 1 assistance or not. For doing it, we will evaluate 3 factors. So what factors you have evaluated, what is your analysis, what is your evaluation, that you have to write it in your audit documentation. And along with that, the nature and extent of the work used. So what information you have used from the internal audit report, in which area you have used the work of internal auditors for type 1, that also you have to record. And what audit procedures are performed by the external auditor to evaluate whether the work used is adequacy of work used. How you have decided whatever work we have used of the internal auditors, whether that is adequate for your purposes, that is whether internal auditors did the work properly. How you have decided it, that also you have to document. So whenever you have used type 1 work, these things should form part of your documentation. Similarly, when you have decided or when you have used type 2 work, then what you will evaluate? The same thing. 2 factors you will evaluate, no, that we will document. So if you see here, if the external auditor uses internal auditors to provide direct assistance, then the external auditor shall include in his audit documentation certain information. What is that? Evaluation of existence and significance of threats to the objectivity of the internal auditor and level of competence. Nothing but 2 factors we will evaluate now. So what information you have evaluated, that you have to include it. Similarly, nature and extent of work, where you have allocated the work, to what extent you have allocated the work, that also you have to document. Who reviewed the work performed? See, once internal auditors have done the work for you, you need to review that work. No, who reviewed it? Engagement partner reviewed it, or some of your staff reviewed it. Who reviewed the work, and what is the date of review? What is the extent of review? The written agreement, you will obtain written agreement. No, written agreement from management, written agreement from internal auditor. That written agreements, whatever you have obtained, that you should not throw it away. You have to document that also. And working papers prepared by internal auditor. See, when you allocated the work to the internal auditor, they will also gather audit documentation. That work gathered by internal auditors as a part of direct assistance, does that belong to internal auditor or does it belong to external auditor? It belongs to external auditor. It should form part of external auditor's documentation. So along with your general documentation, even these things also should be included. Understood? That's all, guys. This is what SS 610 is about. So what we have understood in the standard: few definitions, objectives. If you want to use type 1 work, what factors you have to evaluate when you are prohibited. If you want to use type 2 work, what factors you have to evaluate when it is prohibited. Which areas you should not allocate it for direct assistance. And also you have to obtain written agreement in case of direct assistance, and what extra things should form part of your documentation. That's it. Hope you guys have found this video informative and fruitful. So that's all from my side, guys. Thank you very much. Bye everybody. Take care.